Hey everyone, Reese here, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're all doing well out there, and apologies for the slightly unorthodox setup here. I've moved some stuff around, well, I should say I've moved myself around. The actual studio setup itself is exactly as it always is, but I've got some stuff going on the desk. I've got a big project on there, and I was very conscious of the fact that I was running out of time to sit down and actually record this week's ramble. So rather than kind of move all of that and then have to set it all up again, I thought I'll just shove myself in a corner and we'll do it a little bit differently this week. So hope you're doing well out there. Of course, we are well into January now. What is this? This is the 18th of January this will be going out. And it's warmed up a little bit here in the UK, just a little bit. I know you appreciate my weekly weather forecasts, so there you go. That's that. But I think without further fannying about, shall I say, let's get into our first story for this week. And I'm going to kick this one off with some rather exciting news from the world of MiSTer this week. MiSTer, of course, being that fantastic FPGA-based project, a big open source project, loads and loads of people involved developing cores and things for that, to run all of those old computers and consoles and things from the past, going all the way back to the earliest stuff in the 1970s, all the way up to kind of the mid to late 90s, things like the N64, the Sega Saturn, there's a 486p PC core for it as well. And quite a mature project. It's been going for quite a few years now, but still has a lot of surprises up its sleeve. I think most recently the Sega Saturn, which a lot of people certainly for a few years at the beginning said couldn't be done because they assumed the FPGA chip, the Cyclone 5, wasn't complex enough to be able to handle that. And then they were proven wrong. And then, of course, there was a dual RAM requirement for that, which was eventually overcome. And then most recently, I think, though, it was the Atari Jaguar core, of course, ably demonstrated by Pixel Cherry Ninja a couple of weeks ago, showing lots of games running. And again, the requirement for the second core removed, which for owners of the MiSTer multi-system like myself, which doesn't have support for that second core because the designers of that decided to use the GPIO for analog video output and that kind of thing, it's very good news. It's very good news indeed, because it means that we get to play with those things as well. But refining and optimizing stuff is all well and good. But one thing we don't see all that often, kind of outside of the arcade world, I guess, the arcade guys are certainly still very busy, but one thing that we don't see very often is an entire new core for a console or a computer that hasn't been supported by MiSTer previously. But this week, there is one. There is a brand new core for MiSTer, and this has been announced by MiSTer himself. So without further ado, let's go and check this out on Twitter. And this is, of course, a tweet by Sergey Dvodnenko, otherwise known as Sorgalig. And again, apologies for my pronunciation for either of those. I'm terrible at that. But anyway, he tweets, for the last 2 years, when I have free time, I've been developing the 3DO core. Finally, I have some visual result. There is still a lot of work to be done on Sprite Engine and DSP. So far, only a few 2D games with rectangular sprites work. And I will warn you that he is known for his modesty as well. So this is actually quite a bit more impressive than he's letting on, I think, based on the video that I'm about to show to you. But of course, as mentioned, Sorgalig is MiSTer himself. He's MiSTer. He's the brains behind the MiSTer project. So when he speaks, the whole community listens because he quite often has exciting things for us, exciting new toys. There are some questions and follow-up comments and things in the replies, just asking about the technical implementation of this, some issues with VRAM and stuff like that all went completely over my head because I'm not an FPGA developer and I'm also not really all that familiar with the 3DO. But of course, the big news is that we now have a 3DO core after a fashion. Early days yet, but if you're not familiar with the 3DO, it is a console that was released in 1994. I am reading this from Wikipedia, by the way. 93, if you're in America, and it was a concept that was kind of dreamt up by EA's founder, Trip Hawkins. And the idea behind the 3DO was that basically different manufacturers would be able to use it as kind of a standard and make their own 3DO consoles. Now, of course, the Panasonic FZ1 is kind of the 3DO machine. And yeah, one that's kind of quite mysterious, I think. One that not a lot of people have a lot of hands-on experience with. I think it's fair to say. I know I certainly don't. And they're the kind of things that get me excited in MiSTer, because, all right, yeah, I can play my old Atari ST games, or 2600 games, or whatever. My Mega Drive games. That's one of my favourite cores on MiSTer. But I think the really exciting thing about the project is allowing people access to hardware that they perhaps couldn't get their hands on in real life due to cost or just rarity or whatever else. So this is right up my street. Really exciting to see a 3DO core, a console I have never played with in my life. And hopefully once this project gets to maturity, we can all check out some 3DO games together. So this is the video over on the YouTube channel. Of course, as always, this will be linked. This will be linked down in the description and in the show notes on your podcast app, if you like. But this video is showing the core in action. I've just picked perhaps the least interesting section there, but it does show. And we've got Flashback running here, of course, very well-known platform adventure type game, I guess, from back in the day. We can see it here running on the 3DO core quite nicely. It's running full speed, I think, by the looks of it. And yeah, this video, I mean, it's 17 minutes long, and it just goes through basically the loading of a lot of different games. As mentioned, they are all 2D games. The 3DO, as you might expect based on the name, it did have 3D capabilities, and they haven't been implemented yet. But this is looking so amazing for a first release. I am very impressed with this. My hat is off to Sorgelig. I'll pronounce it slightly differently this time, because if I do it differently every time, I will eventually get it right. Let's just go to another game. So this is Soccer Kid here, which I know from the Atari Jaguar, I think. On the Jaguar. Not really a game I've ever played, but I mean, yeah, it's running smoothly. It's respectable. It's all looking very good. So yeah, some good news from the world of MiSTer. And, to kick off 2025, I guess, a brand new core. How exciting is that? And while we are on the subject of MiSTer, just a very quick update on a story that I've been covering recently, and that is Taki Udon and all of his fantastic work in that world. Stuff like his DE10 Nano clone and his most recent console offering, of course, and there is an update on that. So let's go straight to this. This is over on timeextension.com, and they have actually interviewed Taki Udon, the man himself, all about his new FPGA PS1 console, which I reported on last week. I'm not going to go over everything here. I don't want to spoil this interview for you by divulging all of the details. I do highly recommend that you go and read it yourself. But they're asking some quite interesting and wide-ranging questions about his inspiration behind the console, what sets it apart from other projects that are out there, and just kind of his focus on making this a PS1 really, rather than anything else. Of course, it does run all of the other MiSTer cores, but one of Taki's kind of main foci with this is, of course, to be able to support the original controllers and memory cards and things, as previously reported. So some really good technical details here on how the console was developed and kind of the vision behind it and how it's been implemented, how it's going to support all of that PS1 stuff. So that will be linked in the usual places down in the description, and of course in the show notes on your podcast app, along with all of the other stories covered this week. So go check that out. Some big news this week from a very big name in the world of retro gaming, of course. Although I will say this isn't a retro story specifically. This is something brand spanking new. And of course that company is Nintendo, and the brand spanking new thing is the Switch 2. And I think I should at least acknowledge this. We do have a Switch in the household, although it is chronically underused. I wonder how my Animal Crossing villagers are getting along. Do they die if you neglect them? Hopefully not. Anyway, the Switch 2 has been revealed finally this week. There have been a couple of weeks of leaks, which I've been completely ignoring because they were preceded by years and years of fake leaks. And I just got completely and utterly fed up of hearing about the Switch 2 and decided that I was going to wait for the official announcement. And here it is. So we'll just have a quick look over on the BBC News website. Nintendo finally reveals a new console after weeks of leaks. Now, reveal they have done, and there is a video to go along with this, of course, and that will be linked in the usual places, of course. But there isn't really all that much information to go along with it. There's potentially a new Mario Kart game, which it's a new Nintendo console. Of course, there's going to be a new Mario Kart game, and they have shown off the design of the console and the controllers and how it is slightly bigger than the original Switch. But other than that, not a lot really. There is some speculation that the new controllers are magnetic, as I think that's basically proven by the video that's been put out. But yeah, not a lot else. No price or release date was revealed, the BBC News article goes on to report, but the company will release further details during a showcase on the 2nd of April. The company also repeated one of the few pieces of official information known prior to the reveal, that the new console will be backwards compatible. It means existing Switch games can be played on the new machine, but a disclaimer said that not all titles would be cross-compatible. That's interesting, isn't it? So are they moving it to some kind of new architecture and using some kind of software emulation to run those older games? I think I would have expected it to be kind of a much kind of beefier and a more powerful version of the current SoC that it uses, with perhaps some more RAM and a slightly beefier version of the same GPU, but maybe not. Is it based on the NVIDIA Tegra platform, is it? I can't remember. It's been so long since I've looked at anything to do with the Switch. But anyway, yes. So the video hinted that rumours about the magnetic controller attachments and upgraded joysticks were true. And that's it. Essentially, it just goes on and talks a bit about the history of the Nintendo Switch, how you can use it as a handheld, or you can plug it into your TV, which of course is something that they are repeating with the new console. It's ever so slightly bigger. It looks like it's got slightly better controllers. But other than that, not really any news to report on, but it is nice that it is kind of finally out of the woodwork in an official capacity, and I thought that was at least worth acknowledging. How apt that I would be sat here this week recording this very ramble sat next to my Doom shrine, and indeed directly in front of my desk PC, because this next story is all about running Doom on something weird, and that's my contribution to that world, of course, running Doom on a desk. Quite a successful video from last year, but I will say this is perhaps a little bit more of an impressive achievement. I mean, ultimately, this thing is just a PC inside, and running Doom on a PC. I mean, it doesn't take a genius, does it? But it does take a genius to do this. So this is a story over on Ars Technica, and this is all about Doom running inside a PDF. Now, the Ars Technica story does go into the technical details behind this, of course, and essentially it's talking about how Adobe added support for JavaScript to the PDF file format a long time ago, and it's not really something that's kind of been all that widely supported, that's kind of all that widely used, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside, not really been used for anything all that exciting, but on the Chrome side of things, of course, the Chrome browser, it does support viewing PDF files, and it does have quite robust, as it reports here on Ars Technica, it does have quite robust JavaScript support that is all tied into that. And I'm surprised it's taken this long for someone to take advantage of this, but take advantage of it, they definitely have. So it says here, in the past, hackers have used this little-known Adobe feature to code simple games like Breakout and Tetris into PDF documents, but Aiding 220 went further, recompiling a streamlined fork of Doom's open source code using an old version of Mscriptum that outputs optimized ASM.js code. With that code loaded, the Doom PDF can take inputs via the user typing in a designated text field and generate video output in the form of converted ASCII text fed into 200 individual text fields, each representing a horizontal line of Doom display. The text in those fields is enough to simulate a 6-colour monochrome display at a pretty poor but playable 13 frames per second. And I think I've played Doom on slower systems, so 13 FPS. But yeah, this thing is essentially just using a whole load of text fields to display the graphics and using ASCII characters. Of course, there have been ASCII versions of Doom in the past, but this one is notable because it is contained all within a PDF file. Now, to break with tradition, although admittedly it is a tradition that was started last week, to break with that tradition, I'm not going to play this on this ramble, but I will show you a video of what this looks like in action. And this is on a channel called VK6. So essentially the inputs, I don't know how to explain this. It's running inside a PDF file. There are buttons that you can click on to control the game, to steer it. And you can also use key presses as well, as you might expect. And it runs and looks about as well as you would think, I suppose. I suppose the cool thing about this, actually, with it using these ASCII characters and things, is that you could actually print this. You could print it on a black and white laser printer, any shots from Doom that you like, and that would look quite cool, wouldn't it? But other than that, just a bit of fun, a bit of a tech demo, and yeah, always fun to see Doom running on something new and unusual. So a while back over on my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese, I covered a very interesting piece of hardware called the PicoMEM, which had been developed by a rather lovely Frenchman called Freddie V. And I worked quite closely with him on that. We had a bit of a back and forth and are still very occasionally in touch with him. He's a lovely guy, but most importantly, he's a very clever guy and a guy with grand ambitions for these old machines. So if you're not familiar with the PicoMEM, it was an 8-bit ISA card designed specifically for older kind of XT class PCs. So you kind of early to mid-80s PCs, and I tested it in my Atari PC3, which is like an 8 megahertz machine. So that kind of thing. And it added all sorts of interesting functionality. So basically it used the Raspberry Pi Pico, and it could add Wi-Fi support, USB mouse and controller support, extra RAM, virtual drive support, and indeed it can even emulate an ad-lib sound card. So literally everything all on one card. Really clever project, and I was very, very impressed with it indeed. And of course it's a thing that's still ongoing, but its creator, Freddie V, not a chap to sit still, has decided to tackle another system, and it might be one that you might not expect. It's quite an unusual one. I was very interested to see this announced this week. So this is the Amstrad CPC, and the add-on itself is called the PicoCPC. Very good. And again, of course, it uses the Raspberry Pi Pico for all of its functionality. So at the moment, this adds extra RAM and also the ability to load ROMs. And based on the replies here over on Twitter, there is no kind of release date or price yet. This is still in the very early prototype stage. However, all that said, there is a video of this thing up and running over on a channel called Roderick Studio. And Roderick evidently has got his hands on this hardware and has been doing some testing with it. So the video is in French, but basically starts off just kind of talking about the project and how it came to be, some technical details about how it all works, and then it goes into a really big demo. This is quite a meaty 30-minute plus video, but a really big demo, just demoing all of the kind of the functions in great detail, the extra RAM and all of the rest of it. Really interesting to see, and good to see the CPC getting some love as well, because it's not a system that I really have all that much experience with. I did have a friend as a kid who had one, and do kind of have very vague memories of kind of poking about with it, but I would have been very, very young. But yeah, very surprisingly capable system, and of course, being Amstrad, a very affordable system as well. Just not one that was absolutely huge, I think it's fair to say. Although that said, I think it was quite big in Europe, so yeah, perhaps the PicoCPC is the excuse that I need to finally get to grips with this hardware. So certainly a project I'll be keeping an eye on, and I always like to support Freddie and what he does, because he's very good at it and he's very passionate about it. Just nice to see the CPC getting some love. And that brings us around to my regular video of the week feature, of course, wherein I feature a video that I've seen here on YouTube in the past week that has entertained or enlightened or amused or otherwise informed me, often on the topics of retro and vintage computing, hardware repairs and all that wonderful stuff. And this one very much does fit into those categories. So this was posted on my Discord server by Steve's Tech Shed, big supporter of the channel and a regular contributor to these rambles. So thank you ever so much to you, Steve. Let's go check out the video. So this is on a channel called Bits and Bolts, and he basically goes into a very in-depth and detailed repair of a Voodoo 2 graphics card, of course from the late 90s. Very rare cards these, because they have a lot of custom hardware on them, custom chips, and this one in particular definitely looks like it hasn't been particularly well looked after. So the issue here is that one of the custom chips has been cracked on the board. I mean, you can, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the extent of all of the damage to this thing. We've got missing pins, we've got rusty connectors, we've got bent feature connector and stuff like that. So this thing has been properly chucked about, probably in a box full of other stuff for many, many years. And Yeah, this is a really kind of in-depth and involved repair. I don't want to spoil the video, of course, but he basically ends up delidding the custom chip and showing what it looks like inside. And we've got thermal imaging involved and all the rest of it, and just it's just a really in-depth and interesting video, and going over and above what most people would consider. I mean, all right, swapping one custom chip for another, this very kind of fine-pitched things with, heat gun, surface mount soldering, that kind of stuff, is complicated enough as it is, but to actually delid the chip and poke around inside, I think is taking things to another level. So really interesting video. It's 37 minutes long and quite a good watch, this one. Definitely highly recommended. And big thank you to Steve for sending it over to me. And that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble, so thank you ever so much for joining me once more. I will, of course, point you to my main channel and to my weekly release for this week, which is all about the Mac Pro. And this video seems to be doing quite well. It's been out for a few hours now. How many hours has this been live on YouTube? 7 hours and 15 minutes. It's got 3,300 views, which apparently is 10% up on my usual video performance. So yay me. And basically in this one I was donated a Mac Pro, a 2008 Intel Mac Pro. It had been dropped quite severely in transit, so needed stripping down and thoroughly checking out and straightening out, new thermal compound and all the other bits and pieces that you might expect. And in the process, I decided it might be a good opportunity to give you all a tour of the insides and how it all works and how it fits together, because I certainly hadn't seen the inside of one of these before, and it turned out that it was actually quite interesting. And it's a ridiculously powerful machine for its time as well, so very interesting to look at, and should hopefully serve as the basis for some kind of interesting project on the channel in the future. So that is that, and of course that will be linked below in all the usual places, and so will everything else that I've talked about in this week's Ramble. So that's all I have for you. Once again, apologies for the squeaky chair. I don't know if you've been listening to that throughout. It's been absolutely driving me mad, and I have no idea why it's doing it. Yeah, that's the chair, I promise. I'll see you next week. Bye.